Hello, everyone. Welcome to this live stream special. Andy, good that you're joining me. Then I was worried that you'd sneaked off. But thank you
No,
for
never.
tuning in, everyone. Andy, I'll come to you in a second, but I just want to be honest with the listeners because I've got a bit of a fever or something. Maybe it was at London Build Expo. Maybe I should have washed my hands a bit more or whatever. But the show doesn't stop. So if I sound like I'm hallucinating, I probably are. More to the point, though, I was really excited to do this episode. And that's why I've dragged myself out of bed because I've got an important guest all the way around the world. Now, I've got one or two friends, Andy, okay, that I've always talked about what it's like to live in Dubai, how awesome it is, all the careers out there. But I've got a confession. I've never even been to Dubai, right? And it's on my list because you've got to see all these different parts of the world. However, I was really flattered when you came up with this idea to talk about today what it's like to work as an architect or an architectural technician, technologist, whatever, in the Gulf. So without further ado, may I introduce formally Mr. Andy Shaw. Andy, welcome to the stage. How are you doing? You all right?
Very good, thank you. Yes. Hope you get better soon. This thing's
Uh,
been,
don't don't
yeah.
worry, the adrenaline's pumping up and I'm getting into it. So, Andy, for people who are not familiar with yourself, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are, what you've been up to, and where you are as well?
Yep. So I'm living in Dubai now for 12 years. I did study in the UK. I worked in London about 12, 13 years for that. And I spent about 4 days a week practicing as an architect. I have a small firm here. I'm partner with a young guy I met here about 10 years ago. And we're quite busy with some interesting projects. I became elected as the Reba Gulf chapter chair a few years ago as well, which is the start of COVID. So I've been in that kind of vulnerable doing what we can, putting on some events and building tours and webinars, and now we can meet up socially again and things. I also teach at Heriot-Watt University here. There are two REBA accredited universities in the Gulf. No part two yet. That might change, but there's two doing part one. That's in the GCC. There's others in Egypt and Lebanon. But yeah, I teach at Heriot-Watt University for 5 years now, and they have a part one course.
Got you. All right, cool. So, and it's amazing what you've done now, and we can talk about that in a bit more detail. I'm really interested to know though, because you left the UK, right, in like 2011. Can you tell us where that came about, and at the time, how was it pitched to you? The idea, was it something you wanted to do, or did someone approach you with the idea, or were you headhunted for a job in Dubai?
Sort of both, actually. But I think I don't normally give the honest answer to this because it can get a bit personal. But I'll be honest here. And I think because it's quite important in the current context from what I see in the UK in the last 10, 12 years there. I saw a big change in the financial crisis, 2000s of 8, 9, in working in London as an architect. It was actually quite pleasant and fun before, and you could have a decent life even on a part two salary, which I was. The kind of atmosphere and mood changed after that. I'd started for the first time reading about economics, politics, finance, and thinking, actually, who's going to pay for this financial crisis? I think it's going to be all of us. I'm not sure if I want to be around for this. I wasn't very happy about the Conservatives coming to power either, to be honest. And also I thought, I've been in the UK all my life. I'd like to live somewhere else at least a few years. So let's start looking around. And having done that, there was a few potential things happening, but actually an old manager asked me to come join him in Dubai, basically. But so I'd already decided to change country, change location, and was looking around, and around the same time that kind of led to somebody asking to join.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, there's a few myths, I'm sure, and also a few truths about working in Dubai in the Middle East. And so, one of the first things that comes to mind is money and tax. And now, because you've been truthful, and I appreciate you saying, well, you're going to give the honest answers. And it's just little old me and you and the live stream here. But that aside, so financially, it's a more attractive proposition then than working in the UK. Is that true?
Basically, yes. And right now, because the pound's gone down like a third since I came, or certainly 25%, the currency is pegged to the dollar. So local salaries now sound even higher in UK terms.
Right.
Obviously, all relative to cost of living and things. I can give some examples, sort of benchmarks, to help
Please.
explain. Okay, so, but before, bear in mind, it's different economy, different world. There's no tax. Well, no income tax. Your salary is not really taxed. There are a few taxes here and there, like on your rent, there's effectively a tax. There's VAT. But yeah, you're not getting income tax, national insurance, or anything coming out. So what you're paid kind of comes to you completely. And even actually, when you leave your job, if you spend a few years, you're given something called a gratuity, which is equivalent of like a pension plan. They give you like a month or two salary on top. So part one, we were certainly paying about £28,000 a year equivalent. But I know of part ones graduating here going up to £40,000 working on design management side.
Crikey.
And again, because that's tax free, that's kind of the equivalent of probably about 55, 60 in the UK.
Yeah.
Which that's for part one with really a year or so experience. Again, a bit of variety, might go slightly lower than that, but certainly like 28 to 30, 32 tax free should be possible part one.
Wow. That's a big jump, Andy, to hear. I mean, I think that there's interesting timing because the salary survey came out at the moment. There's kind of one of these campaigns in the UK. And I think the upper end for a part one in the UK was 26,000. And of course, you've got then all the tax involved. So it sounds quite lucrative in that front. Okay, devil's advocate, though, on the other side, because one of the things that I hear in Dubai, because some people, they work on a Saturday, is that right? Or a Sunday? So the working week is 6 days, not 7. Is that wrong or is that right?
That is wrong.
Okay, cool. I thought that, I don't know where I've got that from. Okay, so that's a myth debusted.
Yeah, I'll give more detail. Maybe that came about because until a year ago, the UAE used to work on a Sunday to Thursday week because Friday is a more holy day. And then quite abruptly, last December, it was announced that it's now Monday to Friday, which is actually part of the process of becoming more and more aligned with international norms in many kind of ways. Corporation tax coming in, things, a minimum wage is coming in. So things are kind of moving along that direction. So it moved to Monday to Friday. Actually, government employees, which is many of the big developers, are 4.5-day week. They're supposed to finish Friday lunchtime. And one of the Emirates is even a 4-day week, Monday to Thursday. Now, some bit different on site. If you're in a site role, you probably wouldn't expect to work 6 days, but there'd probably be activity across the site 6 days. And obviously, there is a spec. I imagine like UK, there's a spectrum of offices. Some are working too hard, exploiting their workers and things, and pushed to work most weekends. Some are actually well managed and more reasonable, and just doing a Monday to Friday in a more typical working week. In that case, depend where you're working. So, but now since last January, Saturday, Sunday is a weekend, and for most people, some people, Friday afternoon as well.
Wow, there you go. I mean, it was while we were talking, Andy. Abadir says that's crazy. That's what a part two would get here in the UK. So it is true. There is that big salary shift. Now,
but actually, it gets more extreme as you get more senior. It gets more extreme actually.
Go on.
A part two, and I know it's based on people I kind of know coming here. Probably 40K for a part two is not unreasonable. I checked somebody who's employing a big company here. He gave that kind of figure. So that's 40K tax free for part two. And I know one with a few years experience actually getting 55,000. Now you've got to be careful because in Switzerland, America, salaries are higher. New York's higher than the middle of nowhere in America. Every other bits of the UAE will be lower. Saudi salaries are actually even higher. So it is all relative, but actually, the more important, I'd say the cost of living here is actually about the same as the UK. It is quite different. Depends what you like doing. generally entertainment is expensive because it's set. I mean, if you come as a tourist, you'll probably find yourself fleeced. Basically, everything you would want to do is very expensive. Alcohol is expensive. Golf is expensive, but cycling is free. Swimming in the beach is free. Transport's very cheap, as in taxis and cars and things are cheap. But yeah, it's kind of all that thing's kind of skewed. And if you start getting into schools and things like that, more complicated in university. But generally, I'd say the cost of living, although your salary's higher, your cost of living is similar to UK. And then there's a big difference also. You're not paying taxes. The higher that goes, the bigger kind of differential becomes.
While we were talking, Oz says, I've worked in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Forgive me, Oz, I'm hallucinating today. And the standard of living is higher. Depending where you work, you can have very different experience. Pay is high. Work can be extreme. If you're ambitious, it's worth it. So that's a well-rounded account there. So Andy, while we were talking there's a few things that you touched upon, and I'd love for us to expand. So there's a few really good employers, I'm sure, like everywhere. But also you mentioned that it can be a culture of exploitation. So what do you have to do there? Is it a case of you have to research where you want to work, or is there companies that you generally have a reputation they want to avoid? Or how, if I'm going to buy, do I make sure that I'm not going to be working crazy hours?
I think if you have any kind of contacts you could ask in the region, obviously if the Gulf chapter is just a community of members, we'd probably help out. I've often spoken to people moving over here to give some advice. I mean, there are here some of the big international firms in all big global cities, whether it's Atkins, Gensler, AECOM, Foster has an office, Woods Bagot, that you might have some kind of expectations of already, and ADIS, all these kind of companies. There's also some that are now quite big that are more maybe locally originated or broke off from a bigger company and started here that you might not know about. And I mean, it's difficult because you'll get an honest answer from a website or anything. You probably have to try and find people on the inside. And even then, someone can have a bad experience. The majority may have a better experience or vice versa. So I'd say tap into the intel. Or the other thing is, if you are quite tempted to come, I mean, it is probably, I tell people, once you have one job here, it's much easier to get another job. And you're probably, again, things are changing. There's some new laws about protecting employees and severance pay, things like that, is generally getting better. But it tends to be a bit more volatile and kind of hire and fire. So that's obviously not good if you're fired. But the other side is often it happens with the engineers as well. And when one's fired, another one's hiring because there's just someone else has started a big project. And you're more dependent on the economy itself, actually. So it's probably more common to hop around a bit. There are some people that spend years in one company. Some tend to just join a company, do a project, and then it finishes. And so they manage to jump to something else. But in that sense, if you found yourself in a company that wasn't a good fit, you could probably move to another one, and especially if the market's good like now. And in terms of visas and everything, it's got a little bit easier to do that as well.
Right, got it.
You have more freedom as an employee to jump around. There's some new visas that allow you to stay here and look for work. You have a bit more power than before.
Fair enough. I've got an interesting question that's come in while we were talking. Excuse me. I'm like, thank goodness the audience is asking questions, Andy, and you're sharing a lot because you're making my job really easy at the moment. Abadir again says, can you recommend the best way to apply for a job in Dubai? Do you need the ROBA Part 3 to do an architect role in Dubai? So both really interesting questions. So one is about qualifications. Maybe, as you said, some practices put more stock in an ARB qualification. I don't know. But where would you begin finding a job? I mean, you've got a practice and people can apply for your practice, but also if you were rocking up, how would you begin that search, Andy? Where's the best place to start?
Okay, I'll answer the second part of the question because it's maybe a bit clearer to answer. In that, and it often comes up to me between students and architects here, there is no equivalent really of ARB or even Reba here,
Right.
the title's not protected. So having Part 3 is kind of legally meaningless. However, it does have credibility in the market to employers and things. And actually, you can call yourself an architect even without Part 3 here, because there's not the same protection of title, which you tend to see obviously in the market. However, if someone comes here with Part 3, especially to some kind of international company, it's recognized that you're kind of in a management role position already. You have proper experience. You'll be in a bigger salary bracket and things like that. You'll be kind of slotted up quite a bit. Similar to Part 1 and 2, it's kind of, there's so many other systems here as well. There's people coming with American qualifications or Indian or other ones, Australian things. So there's not the same ease to slot people in. But the Reba is kind of recognized, especially Part 1 now, because there's 2 schools. There's no Part 2. But the big companies certainly recognize it, and they will kind of equate that to your knowledge and skills that they'd expect from it. So that might answer it. So you don't need Part 3 to be an architect. I won't get into things like there is kind of licensing, but it's really more about engineering, not architecture.
Very interesting.
You need an engineer, registered engineer partner of a company to do something if you start a small company. Now, the best way to apply for a job in Dubai, I do recommend to people normally, if you're on the ground in Dubai with a Dubai address, it is a lot easier. That's obviously quite a commitment though, unless you have other reasons or ways to be here. But being on the ground with that address in your CV will probably get more attention. They do tend to get quite subscribe to jobs, but at the moment the market's quite buoyant, and I know lots of companies are hiring. And if anything, they're struggling a bit to find the right people for their roles with good experience. There are some lists. If you internet searching, you'll find a list of the companies here. I mean, it's not a huge market. There's maybe only 20, 30 names would come up that would be considered working for. So online research. I mean, often requests come through to the chapter through Reba, and we give some advice as well.
Nice.
So, I mean, again, applying for a job, you know from your background and other social topics and things we did with Reba before. There's the networking way is obviously the best. There are adverts sometimes. There's agents. There's sending an email in. But I know here the companies tend to get a lot of emails. If you have the other ways are better. If you know somebody, if you friend of friend, anything, or any institutional connection, or even just going. We did some office tours yesterday, actually, my students, and one of them said, we actually like people showing up on our doorstep. He acknowledged many offices don't like that, but he said it, the CEO, he said he liked it because it shows commitment.
Very interesting.
So, yeah, it depends a bit. Again, it depends where you're applying from and if you have any connection to the region or background for it. If coming, I think if you're applying from the UK, it's always a little bit harder to think, am I really sure you're serious, you want to come?
Yeah.
So probably that's the hurdles to kind of say, actually, yes, I'm serious. And there's a way in the cover letter to communicate that. I mentioned earlier that some people contacted that were coming through the partner's work and so they wanted to find an architect's job, and they asked, how do I find an architect's job? But that meant that they were committed to coming. They had an address that showed that they were here already. It was a step ahead.
I think that's the same in the UK. I always recommend, Andy, if someone's, in America, or maybe they're in the Middle East, they want to get a job in the UK. It is a commitment, but actually coming to the UK makes a big difference. And the other one I always say is get a mobile phone in that area code, then, because I think that really also shows a lot of commitment. And it's not that expensive to do anyways now, isn't it? So you get a local mobile, you put it on the phone, you put it on the CV, and that makes a big difference.
And there is something now, I mean, you can come as a tourist for, depending on your passport, but certainly up to 3 months and maybe more. And there's now a job seekers visa where you come specifically to look for work.
Oh, okay, cool. Do you know, while we were talking, I've got a flurry of messages that have come in, all good, but I'm just going to quickly go through a few of them. And so Irfan says, as a chartered architectural technologist, are there any positions available for someone of my new build developer background. So architectural technicians and technologists, and is there a space for those who are not architects in the Middle East? I would have thought so. That's quite a good skill set, right?
Yeah, I mean maybe this practice different to different, but they tend to sometimes separate between the concept stage, delivery stage, and the delivery will be putting a lot of technical things together for the documentation and going through coordination, scheme design things. And so those kind of companies are often hiring. And I would have thought, yes, there's a lot of hiring at the moment. I mean, something I might come to later is that although Dubai is busy in hiring, probably Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia is building a lot and hiring a lot of people there as well. If there's different connections there, I mean, there's the REBA committee has a representative there. Many REBA members have gone over there to become design managers and work in companies there. But there's a lot of momentum there. But that's also feeding a lot of work from Dubai, where it's still a little bit easier to live. So I would say basically yes. I don't know that area quite as much, but at the moment, a lot depends on when things go slow. It is a roller coaster. There's some good years, depending on the politics and economy at the time. In a tough time, it's hard to get a job anywhere. You've got to be quite lucky, and there's always site work and things. When things are busy like now, it's a lot easier. Some companies are, we need 6 people now. Things tend to go quick.
I was going to ask you actually, because I know you really enjoy the fact you relocated, you enjoy where you are and you wouldn't change it. Is there some things you miss though about the UK? Come on, right? We've got some good qualities over here.
But now London, I miss some of the cultural sides of London. Like you can go to a concert every night, different probably gallery show every weekend, whatever. Dubai has got a bit of that, obviously, but it's it's more of an event. We had Guns N' Roses came a couple of years ago. It was like the whole city went. I think.
Oh wow! Really?
More of a rare event. Yeah. They have some constant things, but yeah, it's every now and then rather than all the time. But I mean, here, it's maybe again surprisingly cosmopolitan. It's apparently the second most cosmopolitan in the world or something. So there's actually a lot of British people here. I can't remember, it's a few 100,000 or something. If you want to live in a bit of there's even a place called Irish Village, which is basically pubs.
Oh, really? I'm not surprised.
Yeah. That has 80s bands playing because there's so many older people here. There's some things like that if you feel like you're missing home a bit. I guess the rain, no rain. Yeah, I miss a bit of the sense of humor and some of the activities you can do at home. Yeah.
Yeah, well, makes sense. I've actually got a few flurries of more stuff that's coming. I can't keep up, Andy. You're actually quite popular. I'll quickly go through it. Oz says, we'd love to keep in touch with your LinkedIn. There's ambitions to and returning to Dubai, and is a Revit expert with BIM services. Maybe we can touch upon that really quickly then, Andy, in terms of Revit, BIM. So what's it like out there in terms of software setup? Are most companies tend to be AutoCAD, or have you got, because in London, Revit now is the predominant platform which is used. And so what skill set is really attractive if you're applying in Dubai at the moment?
Revit is the dominant platform massively, I would say, for the production side. What's maybe a bit more flexible is on the concept stage work, the early stages. You tend to get offices that are Rhino based with a bit of Grasshopper and things, or they might be SketchUp based, especially doing master planning. And then obviously AutoCAD supporting all these things. But so Revit is dominant. It's more for the design stage. Is it Rhino or SketchUp?
Very interesting. Yeah, I worked with a practice in London which does international projects, and their setup is Revit, Rhino, and a bit of Grasshopper for the front end. Master plan design. I've got a few more things here, Andy. Abadir says thanks for answering, and Julian says greetings from London. See, you've got an international fan base. It seems you need to come back a bit as well. But Leo, who I was actually fortunate enough to be at one of his events last night. So Leo is an architect, but also designs a lot in the metaverse. So maybe the final frontier, right? Not just the Middle East; it's the metaverse. And he asks, do you know much about this new world? Do you hear much about the metaverse out there? I know you got the design, you've got the expos, which are amazing, but what about the metaverse, Andy? Are the people talking about it in Dubai or not yet?
So yes, not me. I'm not an expert.
You're not
my
interested.
quite well. We did some AI mid events with Reba last week, but metaverse it is. I go to a lot of the trade shows and things with my role, and they often have a metaverse discussion. And there's several architects I've known here for years that are now metaverse focused. One or two firms saying yes, they're getting fully into it. If he drops me a message, I can even mention them. There's something about metaverse hotel, hospital. But in the bigger picture, what's worth bearing in mind is that the UAE and now Saudi, they're aware that they're kind of young countries. I should know, it's either 45 or 50 years old. But, they're not. They're younger than most people, and they're to kind of make a mark on the world. And they tend to lean in a lot on this emerging technology as a way to do that, because they won't have a 200-year-old institution like Reba or the same when it comes to science and medicine and things. So it's interesting when they decide to look at the future. It's why they have a museum of the future. And they're actually very proud of many of the emerging technologies, agri-tech, AI, coding, all those kind of things. And that does cover metaverse. And what I read today, also blockchain, is becoming a bit of a blockchain hub. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm just reporting what I read. That the UAE is becoming a bit of they want to be a kind of safe haven and a hotspot for blockchain technology. So I do see in the events happening and things published LinkedIn and further that metaverse comes up a lot, and any kind of emerging technology does get a lot of interest here because they're keen to kind of be big players in these emerging fields.
Yeah, fair enough. I was going to ask another thing actually. So what I was thinking about now, very cool, and it makes a lot of sense actually that metaverse would be such a subject, because I think Middle East, the Gulf, Dubai, and everything, you're not shy in terms of buildings, the expo, everything's quite interesting, spectacular, a spectacle for the eyes. What I was going to ask though is I wouldn't know where to begin, right? So years ago when I was Welsh, well, I am Welsh now, what am I on about? But when I was living in Wales, I studied architecture in London. And I was like babe in the woods coming to London, right? And looking back, it's one of the best things I did, but I was a little bit naive. Now, if I was like, right, I want to move out of this country. You mentioned this community of expats and so on and so forth in different parts of the Middle East and the Gulf. Where would be a good place to dip your toes? Maybe like a busy city, where you've got that community, like you mentioned. Where's a good place for you to start your search if you will relocate into the Middle East?
To the Gulf. Dubai is it's the easiest, and there's the most amount of foreigners, international community here, and probably the most familiar, easy to settle into. It really probably feel like Miami to an American with a few camels around. It's Dubai, then kind of Abu Dhabi, and Saudi's changing a lot, changed a huge amount in the last 5-6 years, and it's kind of moving that direction. But there's some things you can't quite do there. You probably can soon. And I know people in Saudi are very happy. They live in a kind of closed compound with a very tight community, and they go for a drink in the embassy where they're allowed to. But that's probably Saudi's heading that way. That's a bit more of a frontier for now. But Dubai is the easiest. But anywhere else in the UAE, like Abu Dhabi, would be the likely destination. But they all have their own character and charm. There's the other ones really are Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Doha. But probably, I think most people say the easiest in terms of fitting in would be Dubai.
Yeah, makes sense. And that rings true because there was a lot of roles. I used to work in recruitment in Dubai, and you're right. Also, there you've got the Hopkins architects. You've got all the, as you say, the the British large companies or international companies also out in Dubai. So there you go. I love that. It's Miami with a camel. That's a new one, isn't it? I think that sums it up. I've got one or two more questions if you've got a little bit more time,
Yeah.
Andy. Awesome. And so Abdi again says, I'm considering relocating to Dubai. So, hey, you definitely onto a winner. That's exactly what Andy said. One last question is, how's the lifestyle and the work culture? How is it different to working in London?
Let's see. I mean, work-wise, well, the type of project is very different. It's bigger, faster, a lot bigger scale, and some quite crazy projects. And all new build on new site. You're not the contacts that you do in London. There's not the planning process is more technical. There's not so much about visual and approval things. But otherwise, especially the more established international, it's probably quite similar to London in terms of how they work as an office and the culture. So I think there'll be there's some work cultures I hear very positive things, make people quite happy. More, I don't hear bad things. There's some I do hear bad things. They'll all vary. Lifestyle is probably the biggest difference, actually, if you think about outside the office. And then, I was worried doing this that my others in the region, some of you know, like Mariam in the Revit committee, the UK kind of misrepresents the Middle East with its tabloid press. And it's like, if you only see these Instagram influencers and some news stories, you might think it's all like beaches and parties and things, when it's actually the people working, especially their families, they have a garden, they go to, many people go cycling in the desert. There's a 150-kilometer long cycle track. There's some walks in the mangroves in Abu Dhabi, trips to the beach. It's probably it's just different kind of city. It's sunny all the time. Summer's so hot that you've got to be different. You stay indoors, but there's actually quite a lot of things indoors. If you have children, there's lots of huge play areas with soft play, bouncing stuff, and some very good educational areas. But many people get away in the summer as long as they can, if they can. But in the winter months like now, it's very pleasant. It hardly ever rains. So there's quite a lot of outdoorsy stuff. And people tend to find something they like, whether that's meeting their friends and having a drink, or something sport-based, or just time with their family in their... the people tend to live in like communities, and that it's quite carved up. When I mentioned Miami, it's what I think of American later cities, like quite defined by the car and the road. You have different segments of the city very quickly connected by a road, but you definitely can't walk between things. And once you're in your zone, there's things to do within there. So people tend to spend a lot of time living in the community, which will have like a gym, some shops and things, some have a park. I could try and show some pictures now, if this would be the good time. It kind of answers this question.
Yeah.
So let's hope it doesn't crash the thing. But this was from okay, so let's go present, share screen. It's okay. Window. Okay, I hope this doesn't crash anything. This is my presentation from before we go.
There you go.
Okay, so this is showing a park that has a weekly festival at the bottom left, and is a very kind of international cosmopolitan community. The nicest beach on the top left, called Kite Beach, because of the kite surfing, and there's surfing sometimes. So it's free. It's been a bit commercialized with shopping and play parks and things around it. And the top right is a cycle track in the desert, kind of 20-30 minutes from main Dubai. If you have a bike, you can just learn cycle. That this just to show. There's obviously the high-rise residential areas, but even within the city, there's some like low-rise resi like this, which is just these are townhouses with people living with a garden and cars and going to school and work and stuff. And yeah, probably more green than people expect. There is a government initiative to really green the city over the next 10 years.
Nice.
That's an aerial.
Yeah, I often I don't know why, but I always think of Mission Impossible and Tom Cruise
Yeah,
in the sandstorm, and so it's nice to see
yeah,
the greenery, as you say, you know.
yeah. And so this is showing there is that strip of towers, like in that film, is basically down that main road which goes all the way to Abu Dhabi. It's quite a kind of road-based linear city, but it connects these different parts. There's the palm above there, which also many people live on, and has a park down the middle and beaches everywhere. The bit on the top left is called Marina, where many kind of new arrivals, international people find it easier to settle in because there's lots of hotels, bars, nightlife things. But there's a few areas like that, very much high rise, but maybe not. Well, it's got a beach there. I wouldn't say nothing at ground level. And then, but then you can see, like, just like other side of the road, not far away, is a whole area of, I guess it's suburbia in the UK or America, of just villas, townhouses. Many architects probably live somewhere like this if they have a family. If they don't have a family, they probably live nearer the metro and the activities along the main spine. And I'll show this. This is called Sustainable City. There's other versions coming up. These are for growing food, these little pods. There's all these townhouses with solar panels. And there's no cars. So I have been here once as a visitor, and there's people, kids cycling around. They've got an animal welfare place, and yes, there's also people instead. There's some push for sustainability. There's often not meeting the ambitions, but there is quite a drive and intention to be so. I think I'll stop my sharing. But that was to give an idea of that lifestyle isn't maybe just if the people that come on holiday is quite a different thing. When you live here, it's quite different. Stop that.
Well, it definitely did shake my perspective. I'm a little bit disappointed that Tom Cruise isn't knocking around. That being said, it does look quite a nice place to live. What I was going to say now, Andy, because I think it's a good time to wind down, and I appreciate everything that you've said here. In a bit, we'll talk about where people can find you and connect with you. But just before we do that, I like to throw it back because it's unfair for a conversation or an interview to be one way. It should be more like a conversation. So, do you have any questions for me? It's been a little while since we did our last collaboration with the RIBA, right?
I mean, I would be curious to know from your side, being in the UK, what is the perception of Dubai? And it might be, I assume most people know some that went on holiday. They know a bit. But what is the perception you think in the UK of? Let's not go into the rest of the Middle East. Get more complicated. But start with Dubai, which is
Dubai.
the simplest.
It's interesting because in recruitment, I've worked with a lot of people who want to go to Dubai. Also, some architects that are in Dubai, and also then thinking of maybe coming back. Now, I think everyone enjoys Dubai. I think, as you say, the perception is it's a nice place to be. The one bit that always sticks in my mind, though, is I think that when someone's gone to Dubai, they struggle to come back. So, for example, I will have a senior architect who's like, yeah, I'm really interested in coming back to London. Yeah, just find me a job at 70 grand. And I would be like, Jeff or whoever, Jeff, this is not possible. It's a different world, And they're like, really? Well, it doesn't stack up financially for me. And I always say, well, London isn't going to change. So I think that there is a massive difference in the salaries. And I think that it would seem that once you go to Dubai, it's quite hard for you to come back and adjust financially, economically. In terms of your original question, what is the perception? I think the perception is good pay, good city, as you say, expensive alcohol. That seems to pop up a lot. But also work hard. I think there would be. I think that is the perception that you get paid a lot, but you've got to work hard, and it's quite interesting hearing what you say about it as well. And what I like about this conversation is also you are an employer as well as having been an employee in Dubai, so I kind of see the both ends of the scale. But yeah, that's the perception.
Okay, and in terms of lifestyle as well, though, is it seen as a good? I mean, the other thing that does come up is some people think that women can't work or have to cover up and things, which is completely untrue. It's like,
right.
there's, in terms of working, there's no barriers. It's kind of totally equal. If anything, they get more opportunity in some scenarios in client side and things. Or that it's kind of more restricted than it is actually.
Mm. Yeah, I haven't heard that so much. I tend to think, well, it's interesting because I think if someone's halfway thinking about Dubai, then they're on that emotional journey where they're probably going to go through with it. I tend to, I tell you what though, in recruitment, I have also seen a lot of window shoppers. You know what I mean? Where people go, oh, I'd like the idea of that. But I mean, one of the questions that popped up here is perhaps you have a wife and a kid, right? And you're a man. It's hard to just pick up your bags and go. There's a lot of logistics involved. So who knows? I mean, I've never thought about moving to Dubai. I'm not against the idea. But as a Welshman, moving from Swansea to London was a big deal at the time, you know? Any other questions you have for me, Andy?
I don't think so. I mean, the person mentioned, if you have family, you have to consider that as well. And I didn't talk about schools and things, but if anybody wants to get in touch, connect on LinkedIn. I can follow up because each circumstance is different. It is someone a bit different for a graduate or for a couple or someone with children. As you mentioned, going back to the UK or other countries, it's sometimes family that I find brings people back. I know it used to be seen that you come here for like 2 or 3 years, you make some money and go back. Recently, though, it's probably got more and more livable over the last 10, 20 years. It's probably come to stay longer. And as you said, I do know some people that left and then came back. But yeah.
Well, fair
some
enough.
people might not like it. But yeah, if they like it, either the financial side of the pit, it's different. There's sometimes people get a bit homesick, or they decide they want the children growing up back in their home country later, and things. There's different reasons.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, on the bucket list is going out to the expo, because I think that would be a really nice way to get a proper introduction. But I'm going to take you up on the offer, and if I am popping down in the area, you have to take me to the Irish Island or whatever it's called, because I love 80s music. The Irish Village. Irish Island sounds better. Come on, they missed the marketing trick there. Brilliant. Okay, Andy, so where can people find you? They can reach out to you on LinkedIn, I'm guessing?
Yeah, that's the method I use the most. Yeah, I think I'm Andy Shaw on LinkedIn, and they'll see Reba Gulf Chair, probably make it appear. And if they send a message, we'll try and catch up in the next week or two.
Brilliant. Well, I'll give you a round of applause for that. Thank you so much, Andy. I really appreciate it. You've been an absolute gentleman. Hopefully I haven't been coughing too much all the way through this. Okay. People can reach out to you on LinkedIn. Thank you so much. I'm going to end the live stream now. Andy, stay on the stage 1 sec while I just switch it all off. But thank you as well for tuning in. And if you do have any questions for me or Andy, drop us a message on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.